Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. As you guys can see, we have the Corvette behind us. And last time you guys saw, we had the front suspension all torn apart. You know, we just finished up that bushing project. So today we're actually going to be installing the ZR1 front subframe. So we've got to get the stock subframe out. We've got to get the steering rack disconnected. We also have to disconnect the ABS pump. And there's one more thing we got to disconnect. Besides the engine mounts, will also be the power steering cooler. It's this little finned reservoir. I'm not sure if you can see it. You'll be able to see it from the bottom, but we also got to disconnect that. So the removal of the stock subframe shouldn't take too long. I mean, there's only, I think I counted up, there's only like 8 things bolted to it. You know, 8 bolts and nuts and bolts and whatnot. So that should come out pretty quickly. The thing you got to worry about is supporting the engine and transmission. So we either are going to use a floor jack or a jack stand, a combination of both or whatever. What my plan is to actually support the oil pan as well as support the torque tube. So it just kind of depends where we can fit the jack stand or the floor jack. So let's go ahead and get under the car. We'll get the engine supported and get started on this. Alright guys, I'm just kind of show you the new subframe just to kind of short track this. But basically there's some wire clips you need to unplug. There's the wheel bearing sensor here, unplug that. You know, undo these wiring clips here, here, here. There's a big one, smaller one, then another wheel bearing. So that's all your electrical. There is some brake line like clamps that are holding down the brake lines. This one actually is kind of missing. It's here, and I believe there's also one right here on the inside of the subframe. So that's your brake lines. Your power steering is going to be these 2 bolts. I actually removed them from the cooler on the original subframe. There's those. We're going to have your 2 bolts for the power steering rack, so one here, one there. Then you're going to have your engine mount bolts underneath the subframe there. Alright, so like I was saying, the power steering cooler, that's going to be a 10 millimeter. Your ABS pump, that bracket right there, that's going to be 13 millimeter. Your engine mount bolts, which are up here, and your steering rack bolts, which are up here behind the cooler and over to the right of the ABS pump, those are going to be 18 millimeter. And the nuts on the back side are 18 millimeter as well. You can see our pile of bolts over there. And that's pretty much it. Like I said, we've already disconnected all the electrical, all the plumbing for the brakes. This subframe should be ready to drop down. Oh, and also, do have a jack stand in place waiting to go on the bell housing. I decided not to put on the oil pan just due to the fact that I don't want anything hitting that cast aluminum. I believe the torque tube will be stronger, so. And if you need, you could always put a piece of wood. We've got a piece ready. Alright guys, we're going to start lowering the subframe. We're going to take this slowly, and these are 21 millimeter bolts. Guys, I think we're gonna have to pop out the steering rack because it's trying to come with the subframe. Alright guys, boom, subframe is out. Really, the only thing kind of hanging up is the steering rack, and I need to put something under this. So we get a jack stand, and we'll be done here. All right, guys, here are the two subframes: the aluminum stock one in the back, and the magnesium ZR1 Z06 one in the front. And there you guys can see our weld that we fixed. But man, just moving this subframe over from under the card over here, so there's definitely be a weight savings by switching over to the magnesium ZR1 Z06 subframe. So, but did want to show you the car. Kind of mentioned I was putting a jack stand under the steering rack. That literally is the only thing that kind of fell. It was the only thing that really came down, just because there's simply nothing holding up the steering rack. And when we go to swap the new subframe back in, I'll just move the jack stand out of the way and go from there. So, alright guys, I was actually about to put the subframe back under the car, but I forgot that I actually had another project. And what that project is actually a solid bushing for the steering rack from Doug Rippie Motorsports. You guys can see I got a pile of parts here. Well, what this is actually the factory rubber bushing on the passenger side, and this is one half of the solid bushing from Doug Rippie Motorsports. I accidentally stuck the other end in the car just to see if it fit, and now it won't come back out. So instead of trying to mess that up and show you the whole bushing, just imagine it being a metal bushing, you know, that's been turned down in a lathe or CNC, however they have these made. And this will slide into the steering rack. So basically what we're doing is we're replacing the rubber two-piece bushing with a solid metal two-piece bushing. So that's what the rubber one looks like. This is one half of the Doug Rippie bushing. So I actually kind of popped the stock one out with just a screwdriver. It's on the passenger side. It's not super hard to take out. I literally poked it, I pushed half of it out, pulled the other half out with my thumb. So these are not, this is not like the suspension bushings from the earlier videos where I had to drill it, grind it, burn it. This literally just popped right out of the rack. So thankfully, one rubber bushing on this car wasn't a total pain in the butt. And so here is the other half of the bushing that I was telling you about. You guys can see it inside the hole there. And basically all we got to do is take the Doug Rippie part and stick it in this side and we'll be done. Now there is a machine part of this bushing. You guys will see it here. They want that going up. Oh, I'm sorry, I just lost. There you go, right there. That part that's machined with an edge on it, that needs to face upward because the way these steering racks are cast, that bushing needs to slide all the way against the casting, and that's why this metal part is machined like that, so we can go all the way in. So let's go ahead and get this swapped in. Like I said, this is one of those while you were there mods, and I only think this was like 30 bucks from Doug Rippie. It wasn't super expensive. So alright, so we finished putting the bushing in. You guys will see we do have a C-clamp on here. That was just because I didn't have enough leverage to get under here and significantly, you know, be able to push this in very easily. So little C-clamp, pushed it together, and we now have a solid metal bushing from Doug Rippie Motorsports on the steering rack. So there's the front of the steering rack, and there's the back of the steering rack, and we should be good to go. So now that this mod's done, like I said, let's grab that subframe and get started. Alright guys, we have the front subframe kind of installed. I put it on the floor jack like I was saying, and I have it jacked up. We do have it on a couple threads on both front engine mounts. What I'm fighting right now is actually the steering rack. I actually had to take this side back off, drop the whole assembly back down, line the steering rack up, and if you guys can see back there, I do have the bolt and nut going through the steering rack from the front. And so the passenger side steering rack is connected. Now I need to go back over the driver's side and fight with that ABS pump as well as the steering rack on that side. Alright guys, as you can see, we have these spacers from Lingenfelter that we put in. We put those in a while ago for the Camaro supercharger lid from Edelbrock. So we have that installed. We have all four nuts on, so all of the nuts are loose, and we're going to try and get this tightened up. Alright guys, so we're going to go ahead and get started on the driver's side suspension install. As you guys can see, the only thing we have is the steering rack, and that is torqued down. I believe that torqued down to 74 foot-pounds, and the hardware was 18 millimeter. I still need to torque down the subframe bolts. I think those are 81 foot-pounds, but we'll get to that. So right now what we're going to be doing is the upper control arm, and like I said earlier, make sure you keep track of all the hardware and where they go, because some of these, the shims can be different. On my passenger side, the shims, actually there were 2 of them on the front. I believe on the driver's side here it's just 1, so let me double check that for you. Yeah, so on this side it actually doesn't matter, but like I said, just keep track of everything. So what we're gonna do first is put the upper control arm in, and that's right here. Make sure you have the wedged part of the ball joint facing downward, and we're gonna get this in place. All right, you'll see that we have the upper control arm in. These are 15 millimeter bolts. I just tightened them down for now. I haven't torqued them to spec yet. And we've also started the lower control arm. The fitment is a little bit tight. You guys will see we've got our little hammer here. I used it just to tap it in ever so slightly into the spot. And now I'm just gonna have to wiggle it into place. All right, so we got the lower control arm in, and the concentric bolts are in. Obviously nothing is tight yet, but what you want to make sure you do, make sure you put your concentric spacers going in the right way. So obviously this side has had a nut tightened against it, so we'll go like that. And same thing for the back one. Make sure your nut, you know, the side that has the nut marks on it, put that the other way, and we should be good. All right, now you guys are gonna see the front coilover already installed. We're gonna cover that in a different video. We may have already aired that, I'm not sure, but that has either been covered or will be covered. But now what we need to do is put the spindle on, the brakes, the caliper, the rotor, as well as connect the front tie rod. All right, so we kind of got a 2-for-1 on this one. We've got to tighten down both upper and lower ball joints, and basically I just angled the upper control arm just the right angle. I was able to get the upper ball joint in, and the lower ball joint lined up too. So the upper, I believe, is 18 or 19, and the bottom is going to be a 21 millimeter. Once you get them tightened down pretty much as tight as you can, you want to put your castle nut on, and obviously your cotter pin. So we'll do that, and then we'll move on to the brakes. All right guys, we have the ball joints all installed and tightened down. The only thing I haven't done is put the cotter pins in, and we put the grease fitting, the Zerk fittings in. So what we need to do next is actually put on the rotor, the caliper, and then the front tie rod, and we should be done. And then we got to torque everything down to the proper torque specs, but that'll be it. All right, so we have the caliper and rotor mounted. They're not fully on yet. I need to put some blue Loctite on the bolts, and okay, maybe that was a little bit too much, but a little bit of blue Loctite on there. Put it back in the knuckle, screw it back into the caliper, and then you gotta torque it down. Now these are gonna torque down to 125 foot-pounds. So I'm pretty much done torquing the front suspension. We're on the last piece. This is the upper control arm, and these torque down to 48, 49 foot-pounds. I think it's 48. There you go. Alright, there you go. That's pretty much everything. Oh, we also did get the tie rod in, torqued down. So one of the last things that we're going to be torquing today is actually the subframe, and these go to 81 foot-pounds. Alright, there you go. Alright, 81 foot-pounds, and then we got to do the one up here. One last thing before we go, we are finalizing all the stuff. You know, we put the grease fittings in. I think we may have mentioned that earlier. But also the clips, the ZR1 flaps on the little aero ducts on the lower control arm, some of the clips and stuff for the wiring, and the brake lines, you know, we're transferring that over from the old subframe. And that's pretty much to be it. We got one more ZR1 duct to put on the passenger side, and I think that's going to be it. Alright guys, that's pretty much going to be it for the ZR1 subframe install, as well as the front suspension updates. I know we kind of went long on this video, but it's just the nature of these things, and so we tried to break them up. And, I think this is probably like the 4th or 5th suspension video that we've done, but we've got pretty much like one more update, and that will be to actually put the car back on the ground, adjust the suspension that we need to, as well as go get an alignment. So probably some kind of test drive, some kind of alignment video will be in the future. And like I said, we still need to adjust those coilovers. I kind of mentioned that in the coilover video, but we still need to do that as well. So if you guys want to see those future suspension adjustment, fixing, test drive videos, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Also turn on your bell notifications. I'll try to include some part numbers for some of the stuff that we used. Either I'll have a link to the Doug Rippie stuff or just a part number for it, and we can go from there. But if you guys do want to help support the channel, check out our website, BonecrrusherSS.com. We've got merchandise and stuff for sale there, and all those proceeds go right back into the channel. So thanks guys, have a great one.